Welcome all to today's episode of Noontime Chatter at the MUAM University Art Museum. This is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel for future use. My name is Sherry Krazel, and I am pleased to welcome you to Season 2, Episode 3 of our Noontime Chatter for the fall at the MUAM University Art Museum. Today's session is being hosted by the Art Museum Director, Jack Green. Our topic today is diversity, equity, and inclusion at the Art Museum and Miami. At the end of the session, there will be time for questions. If you could post them in the Q&A or the chat links, and I will share them with our panel. At this time, I am pleased to hand the program over to the Jeffrey Horrell 75 and Rodney Rose, Director and Chief Curator of the Miami University Art Museum, Jack Green. Jack.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for that introduction and for this opportunity to present as part of the Noontime Chatter with staff at MUAM, Miami University Art Museum. It's a great pleasure to be here with our very special guests, Cristina Alcade and Dasha Wood, who I will be introducing in a moment. First of all, before I do that, I want to read a land acknowledgement for Miami University. This land acknowledgement, Miami University is located within the traditional homelands of the Miami and Shawnee people, who along with other indigenous groups ceded these lands to the United States in the first Treaty of Greenville in 1795. The Miami people, whose name our university carries, were forcibly removed from these homelands in 1846. In 1972, a relationship between Miami University and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma began and evolved into a reciprocal partnership, including the creation of the Miami Center at Miami University in 2001. The work of the Miami Center serves the Miami Tribe community and is dedicated to the revitalization of Miami language and culture and to restoring that knowledge to the Miami people. Miami University and the Miami Tribe are proud of this work and of the more than 140 Miami students who've attended Miami since 1991 through the Miami Heritage Award Program. And we'll be talking a little bit more about the relationship with the Miami Tribe and the Miami Center a bit later on in this presentation. Now, I want to introduce our guest speakers for this and guest panelists for this webinar on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Miami and at the Art Museum. So first of all, we have Dr. Cristina Alcade, who is the Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion and is also Professor of Global and Intercultural Studies at Miami University. She is she's providing an integrated, holistic vision of diversity, equity, and inclusion and strategic direction at Miami University and works collaboratively with students, faculty, and staff to lead and support diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts across the university. And it's also a great pleasure to introduce here Dasha Wood, who is the director of the Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion here at Miami University. Dasha is a proud alum of Miami University, having completed her Bachelor of Science in Middle Childhood Education, and she graduated in 2012. She went on to receive a Master's of Education in Student Affairs and Higher Education from Wright State University. And it's wonderful that you've both joined us here. And we're going to be talking about, first of all, Miami University and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then focused on the Center for Student Diversity. And then I will say some words and introduce the Art Museum and what we're doing in relation to DEI. I will also just mention briefly that for the Art Museum, we also use the term DEAI because it's a more commonly used term within the museum sector. That's diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. But just to note that DEI also does include accessibility here at Miami University. So now I'd like to hand over to Cristina, Dr. Alcade. We will have time for questions, Q&A at the end. So please do save those questions. You'll be able to enter them into chat, so we can follow up on those at the end. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Cristina, Dr. Alcalde.
Thanks so much, Jack and Sherry, and it's great to be here with Dasha as well. So it's nice to be here with all of you. So as we were preparing for this, Jack was very specific that we should keep this to, I think, 7 or so minutes. So I'm going to speak a little quickly, but as we said, there are questions afterwards. And what I thought I would do, hopefully this will be a broader discussion, is just discuss an overview of the Office for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion and its role in, and actually we can move to the next slide, thank you. Its role in really moving forward diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice at Miami University, and then share just a few specific initiatives, but it's mostly about just beginning the discussion here in this brief time. So as we have there, I share that because the mission, I think, is really critical. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it can mean a lot of different things. Really, the goal and the mission and the charge of the Office for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion is really to move forward Miami's journey in inclusive excellence. And we can do that in a lot of different ways. So we want to be a little bit specific about what that means. We can do that through programming, of course, but most importantly for the office, we can do that through structures and policies. So it's a lot of looking at policies, asking who has been left out, what the unintended consequences perhaps are of some, and making sure we look at these policies and programming and initiatives holistically so that OIDI can really provide evidence-based approaches. And that's what this is. So we look at DEI through a research lens and through benchmarking and try to understand where are we going, and what do we need to do to get there. So we provide guidance, consultation, resources, and strategies as we coordinate across different units and guide to move forward in what, when folks have asked me what my role is, if I had to use 2 words, I would say cultural transformation. So cultural transformation specifically because we need to identify where in this great continuum of inclusion we talk about, and we really value our inclusive community. So we want to make sure that we're continuously being intentional about what it means to be inclusive, and the reality across institutions, inside higher ed, outside higher ed, is that we tend to see ourselves as more inclusive than we actually are when we take a deep, hard look through research lens. So what we're charged with, and what I think is really critical, is to have these discussions, to look at the strategies, to definitely recognize accomplishments, which there have been so many, and there continue to be, and also equally important, to understand where we are so we can see what strategies we need moving forward, and to get the buy-in from everyone to understand where we're all at. And at an institution like Miami, we're all at different stages in some ways, across units, across areas. So this is why one central area is really critical. By DEI, of course, we can mean a lot of different things. And I think one thing that's important for this discussion is that, of course, at Miami, we mean race, class, and gender. And we mean a lot more. So race, class, and gender are just the most basic, the baseline of a lot of different things. But we have a much broader definition, which we can talk about, which also includes ability, nationality, sexuality, all these different areas. And that's because we take an intersectional approach. So we want to make sure that we truly recognize faculty, staff, students, community members across different areas. We also tend to discuss diversity as diversity of thought, and those what those little circles are. Diversity of thought can be part of it, but it never substitutes for other forms of diversity. And that's really one of the things that we want to make really clear, that it is an intersectional approach, and that it can only be truly comprehensive and holistic if we move beyond the diversity of thought or simply the race, class, and gender that we have. So if we can move on to the next slide. I wanted to share this because as we think, especially the museum, but really all across the university, there are so many things that Miami has accomplished, and oftentimes we don't think of those in terms of inclusion because there is still a lot we need to do. But as I look at Miami, one of the things that's really inspiring to me is the things that we've already done and how they need to guide our steps forward. So in that, I have a few things here. So, we have, of course, Freedom Summer of 64, which I think Jack will talk about a little bit later also, but just, the Western College for Women and the Summer of 64 and voter registration that brought 800 young volunteers, Black and white, together here in what is now Miami is a huge legacy, and it's a responsibility for us to move forward and for us to really reflect on what that means. So that's something that we can explore in a lot of different ways, and hopefully we can discuss that later on. Also, of course, our relationship with the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma. That's a huge partnership, and it's really meaningful because it's specifically built on trust and mutual learning. And that's something that makes Miami really unique and something we can continue to learn from. And again, that could be a whole other presentation. I'll mention one more thing, which is also Miami was the first public university in Ohio to offer same-sex benefits in 2004. And I think that's really critical, again, because these are things that aren't simply in the past, but can inform our steps forward as to what have we done, why did we do them, and how can we build on those, right? Then there are more things on this slide, but for time's sake, I'll just leave it there as far as it's symbolic also what we do and the spaces we inhabit. So for example, having the Nellie Craig Walker Hall is really critical because it really, beyond naming this for the first Black graduate of Miami, it tells us what's important and what's important for those who are here, who belong. So who belongs at Miami, making sure that everything from programming to initiatives to people to buildings really reflect those diverse identities is really critical. So if we can move on to the next one. And as we were talking about, DEI, I thought couple of things to share that I think would be great is that in the next slide, which we don't need to go to yet, but in the next slide, you'll see there are different areas that the university is focusing on across different units. Many of those have to do with capacity building. And in the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, capacity building is really critical and it's one of our strategic priorities. And so I mentioned this because the only way we're going to be able to move forward in this inclusion continuum, if we want to see it this way, is through capacity building across all areas. And one really critical way to do that is to draw on existing expertise. So we have amazing expertise among our faculty and our staff here. And so one of the things that we've done is bring that together in DEI online modules, which we're really, really happy won a national recognition through a Telly Award. And what they are modules that you can see all the different categories and topics there, but they go from racism and anti-racism to age and ageism to ableism to cultural intelligence. So again, a really holistic intersectional view of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. And this is really geared towards those in leadership positions, because as much as we want everything to change, change needs to come from everyone, especially everyone in charge who needs to model what that would look like. So we recently had the DI award ceremony, and we awarded one of the awards to the department that had all faculty go through this. So that's a huge show of institutional commitment, right? And to the division and unit that had most folks in leadership positions, or I think everyone in leadership positions, go through this. So this is one way we're doing this, and we're relaunching this in November. It was originally 10 modules, 45-minute modules, very easy at your own pace modules. And we are adding 4 more, which include things like emotional well-being and masculinities in the workplace, and Miami experiences. And we're going to launch this towards the end of this month. And we hope that everyone at Miami will take this, because I know when I went through all this, I also learned something from this. And all of us, whatever our role, whatever our knowledge, can always continue to learn. So that's one thing. I think it's really critical for all our units, and as we think of strategic plans in departments and divisions and different areas. And then the next slide. How am I doing on time, Jack?
I'm doing fine, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine, don't worry.
So this really provides, so I was thinking of, what are we looking at? One of the things we're looking at is strategic priorities, right? There are different offices, but the Office for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion is really about bringing those together and leading in all these areas. So really having a broad view of what these are. Capacity building, we have so many different things we're focusing on. I shared one of them, the modules. We also have things like diversity statements and workshops for diversity statements and other things we could focus on. We also look at structure, right? Structural areas with policies. And along those lines, one thing I wanted to mention is that this year we're really focusing on climate. So, we focus again on faculty, staff, students, climate. All of these areas across these 4 areas and alumni are really critical. In the climate study, what we're doing is we're taking a multi-method approach. So this semester, we're taking a targeted universalism approach, and we're focusing on racially minoritized faculty and staff, and we're doing stay interviews with them to understand what areas we're doing well and what we can improve moving forward. We're also doing climate interviews with students, similar approach with students, to be able to understand what's going well, what can we improve. That's this semester. Next semester, we're doing a climate survey. And so together, the qualitative aspect from this semester and the quantitative and a little bit of qualitative aspect from next semester will really help us see where we are as an organization, as an institution. And we've created different councils of DEI leaders across the university who will be able to look at these results also as we moving forward, we'll be creating the first DEI strategic plan for the university. So not simply for one area, but across the university. One other area that that's really critical for the university is accountability and transparency. That has to do, of course, with also as leaders, making sure that we're accountable in what we do. So for example, all senior leadership at Miami, the PEC, the provost office deans have gone through anti-racism workshops and safe zone training, right? And that's a way to also reflect those commitments, but also things like the DI task force, which so many faculty, staff, and students spent so much time on. In the spring, what we did was we looked at where we're at, and we found that through a lot of collective individual efforts across Miami, we're now have a 92% completion rate, which is wonderful. But that's part of that accountability, making sure that we continue to move forward in that. I feel like I'm going over, so I'm just going to stop there. But this is really what OIDI focuses on as far as strategic priorities. Some seem more abstract than others. There's coordination that brings all of these together as we move forward and become a more inclusive community, which is the ultimate goal.
Great.
And that's just if anyone is interested in seeing more examples and more ways to find ways to educate ourselves in different areas, you can go to the OIDI webpage, and again, there are resources in your own time, not a specific workshop or training that you can go through. This is to complement things like the Heritage Month programming, which I think Jack and Dasha will also perhaps be talking about, so I won't touch on that too much, but that really provide ways for us to educate ourselves, engage, and do more beyond celebrating, which is important, but it doesn't necessarily change things in the cultural transformation way that we're looking for.
Thank you so much, Cristina, for that wonderful overview, big picture, which is so important. And so we'll have more chance for discussion about those topics. I think it will lead nicely into now Dasha Wood, Director of the Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion. So Dasha.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today, Jack, and happy to be here with Cristina and to talk about this topic. So as Jack said, I am the director for the Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion, which is located in the Armstrong Student Center. And can we go to the next slide? I'm trying to remember. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our mission, which we strive for inclusive excellence within the Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion. We wanted to provide a physical space for students to come and be their most authentic selves and be celebrated within their different identities and cultures and values. And then we provide programming and resources under 2 main umbrellas, which is intercultural initiatives and LGBTQ+ initiatives. So the CSDI has gone through several transformations since its inception. We've only been CSDI since 2019, previously known as the Office of Diversity Affairs, Multicultural Student Enrichment. So this office has truly transformed over the times since it's been at Miami University, which I think is a good thing. I think it's good to transform and to change, and to figure out what's the best structure for the student body. And right now we found that our students are looking for programming and resources under these umbrellas of intercultural initiatives and LGBTQ+ initiatives, which a lot of our program is birthed from. And so could you go to the next slide for me, please? All right, so who are the students that we serve and what does the data say? 25% of our student population identifies as being of a diverse race. And so when we do resources and programming within our center, we try to celebrate those students in a way that they can say, I feel like I am at home away from home when I'm at Miami University. And we do a lot of things within the center. We plan a lot of things, but we also plan a lot of things in partnership with the students to see what they want and what type of programming they want to be a part of, to be celebrated. And then as far as LGBTQ+, 18% of our student population identifies as being a member of the LGBTQ+ population. Now this is self-identified. We collect this data on the admissions application, and we feel that this number is a lot higher because some students don't feel comfortable coming out necessarily with their parents or amongst their friends, and so they just won't report. So we see 18% on paper, but we think that number is higher. Next slide, please. And so programming. So this is some of the programming that we do within our office, some of our main programming. So we have Made at Miami, which is our pre-semester program. We allow students to move in 2 days early and we cover the fee for that. And we feed them the entire time that they're here. And the idea of Made is to allow students to move in before the larger overwhelming move in so that they can get acclimated to campus. So we tell them, like, when you move in, we want you to make at least one friend while you're here and to connect with at least one faculty or staff member. It always ends up being a lot more. They always make more friends and connect with more faculty and staff, but that's the purpose, is for them to create their own community with one another. And the program is marketed to students from diverse backgrounds. So, or students who have a value in diversity. So they have to say that they value diversity or that they are from a diverse background in order to participate in Made. But the idea is to make Miami a little bit smaller for them when they come. So it's not just so big and overwhelming, with Miami being a PWI. Another thing we do within the center is offer trainings and workshops. We have several trainings and workshops that we offer. Our two associate directors of intercultural initiatives and LGBT+ initiatives does workshops. We do safe zone trainings. We do race, power, privilege workshops, identity workshops. So we typically talk to a student organization or a group who wants a workshop and just kind of see where they are in their DEI journey, to see where they start and which training that they can get. And then we also tailor trainings based on the organizations that are asking. We do heritage and cultural programming. We do things within the months, but also outside of the months based on student wants and needs. We do a lot of surveys, a lot of needs assessments, and a lot of informal conversation with students about what type of programming that they want to see that celebrates them while they're here at Miami. We have a Women of Color and Men of Color initiative called My Sister's Keepers and My Campus Brothers. Adelaide, our assistant director, does My Sister's Keeper, and Ellis does My Campus Brother, which are just two groups for men and women of color to kind of come together and talk about issues that they face within the community, but to also create a sense of belonging and community at Miami University with one another. So each of the meetings are themed. They do different things about the meetings. And it's just, again, another place for students to create affinity. We have identity affirming programming. Obviously, all of our programs are tailored to a specific identity or culture. And then to end the semester in May, we have Horizon and Lavender graduation. Horizon graduation is our cultural graduation celebration for students of color, and then Lavender graduation is for our LGBTQ+ students. And that's another way to make their identity celebrated in a smaller scale. So they participate in the larger graduation, but we also have this smaller, more intimate ceremony for students to be celebrated with their families and friends. Next slide, please. So here are some of the resources that we offer within the CSDI. So the physical space is something that is unique for offices. A lot of offices on campus do not really have like a hangout space for students. So where our administrative offices are in the CSDI, we also have student space. So students come in and hang out in between classes. They're able to eat their lunch, create community, talk with friends, take a nap. They do all types of different things here. And we have students who literally come into our center every single day. Like we see the students every day. So students really do build community within our space, and find it a welcoming place for them to come in between classes, after class, before class, however they want to use the space. And then we do have extended hours. So administratively, we're done at 5, but we stay open until 7, so students can still come. And we have student interns that are working during that time. We also offer free printing. So obviously that's a resource for our students who use the space, but it also brings other students into our space who wouldn't normally use the space, which is really good for me. I just want people to know that they are able to come in and be comfortable, and utilize our space in whichever way that they need. Even if it is, they're just coming in to utilize the free printing, like I'm okay with that. We also have a new initiative called our Wellness Room, which is in partnership with Student Wellness. It is a space. We have anxiety reducing beanbag chairs, aromatherapy, sound therapy. It's just a way for students to kind of come in and zen out, because this is a hangout space for our students. We have at times where the space gets really loud, so we wanted to create a quiet space so students can kind of have time to themselves. We also have a campus partners table, so campus partners are able to sign up for a time slot throughout the week and basically do office hours in here. So they bring their office and their resources to our students, and they're able to get in front of students who may not normally come to their office. So I think right now the study abroad office is sitting tables. So students kind of learn about study abroad opportunities that they may not have normally sought out if they weren't in the space. We also have our open door clothes closet, which is a free resource of clothing and accessories for transgender and non-gender conforming students. This is a free resource for students to get clothing and accessories that matches their gender expression. It is a really popular resource. We have students using that space every day, and we run off of donations of money and clothing. And then we just opened our new identity library. So it's a resource for students. We actually have a partnership with King Library where we can check out books right here in our space. And it's a lot of books that are related to the student's identity. So leisure reading, where students can see themselves in the literature. So that's another popular resource that we have here in the center. And then coming soon, we're going to have our culture closet, which is a resource of free hair care products, cultural food products that students have requested that it's difficult to get in Oxford, Ohio. So a lot of times students have to leave Oxford and go to Cincinnati or Hamilton or somewhere outside of the small town of Oxford to get what they need for their cultural products. So we're going to bring that to them so they don't have to leave. And again, that's another resource that is powered by donations. So next slide, please. Okay, so intercultural initiatives under this umbrella, we do culturally relevant and affirming programming. We have student organization advising. So we have a couple of student organizations that are advised out of CSDI, which is DAC, the Diversity Affairs Council, Black Student Action Association, UNIDOS, just to name a few of the orgs that are advised out of CSDI. And then again, we do those training and workshops out of intercultural initiatives that our Associate Director, D. Ellis, does. Next slide. And then we have our LGBTQ+ initiatives, pretty much the same deal, identity affirming, community building programming, as well as student organization advising. So we advise Spectrum, OSTEM, which is out in the STEM field, and then GPSA, the graduate student program organization. And then we have safe zone trainings, and then one-on-one student meetings and advocacy. So students, if they have any issues or concerns with university policies as it relates to gender expression or sexual orientation, they'll typically come in here and speak to us about that, mainly April and Tina, who works on the LGBTQ+ side, just to talk through that and what that looks like for Miami. So we have a lot of conversations around how do we create systemic and structural change within Miami so that it is a more inclusive and affirming environment for our students and their needs. Next slide. So I just wanted to show you all our physical space. We have 3 physical locations. The main space is Armstrong 2030. So if you're ever Armstrong, you see the office with all of the flags, that's CSDI. That is our main lounge space, as well as where all of our administrative offices are. And then we have a third floor space. A lot of people don't know about this space. It's called the C-Suite. We have started doing more programming out of this space for students to kind of see that it's a space. But we have different student organizations who also utilize the space for meetings and programming. And then right across from the C-Suite on the third floor, we have the conference room. So if you are a department or a student organization and you want to utilize our space, just reach out to the CSDI email, csdi@miamioh.edu, and we can reserve this space for you for free.
Thank you so much, Dasha. That was wonderful. Such a rich overview. And I've been over to the center, and I can confirm it's a wonderfully open, accessible place. And it's so wonderful to have that part of the Armstrong Center. You just walk in, and so everyone's really friendly. So I really recommend it. And it's been also wonderful to engage with both of you in relation to the Art Museum. We're so grateful to have your support. We've engaged on different training and consultations with you both. So I'm looking forward to sharing this information about the Art Museum here on campus and some of the things that we've been doing historically, but also looking into the future. What are our initiatives as we go forward with DEAI at the Art Museum in relation to our needs? But we have to think of this within the divisional context too, because we're part of the College of Creative Arts. And so the College of Creative Arts is covering so many different areas, drama, theater, studio art, many different departments. We're a very large and diverse department. But of course, one of the big things that's happened has been long recognized as need to have more diversity and inclusion within the arts. But I think what happened in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, that these acts actually led to a greater emphasis and a desire to do more, to change and to bring more equity and inclusion and diversity to Miami University. This was a widespread, it's been a global thing that's happened. So what happened in 2020 has been that the College of Creative Arts launched a new strategic plan. And as part of that strategic plan, it includes a lot of emphasis on recruiting and retaining Black and Indigenous and people of color students, BIPOC as we term. This is all available on our website, of course, and as well as faculty and staff, BIPOC faculty and staff. But also to integrate anti-racist guidelines and establish those into teaching and pedagogy, and also across the curriculum and programming and across the climate and culture to really try to deal with issues to do with inclusion, diversity across the arts. So you can find out more about that. And there are more things happening across many different departments. So we're just one of many departments that are also working on coming up with ideas and statements and plans for what we're doing with DE&I. First of all, what is the Art Museum and Sculpture Park? Well, we're here in the southeast corner of the campus on the Western College. We have over 17,500 objects in our collection. We were founded in 1978, and we're also an AAM, American Alliance of Museums, accredited museum. Our tagline is celebrating artistic diversity, and our mission is to serve as a teaching museum that engages in dialogue with and about visual culture, as well as maintaining a strong and permanent collection and expanding that collection, and recognizing and celebrating global and artistic cultural diversity through display, study, publication, and educational programs. Now, you see there, we've got the tagline, celebrating artistic diversity. And of course, it's also about sharing knowledge about art and about diverse cultures and different traditions around the world, because we have a truly eclectic collection. So that's one of the aspects, but we also need to think about ways that we need to make our collections and our programs even more diverse and inclusive than they already are. Our vision is to be a regional leader, but also to encourage cross-cultural, cross-faculty collaboration and to share ideas, and also to nurture creativity through understanding of artistic diversity. So again, when it's all about celebrating artistic diversity, that can actually have broad meaning because it could relate to the diverse media in which artists have worked and different periods and times and cultures they come from. But also it can also have the additional meaning of thinking about diversity and what that means to the art museum. Our values are really about collaborating, across the faculty, of course, learning from each other, fostering collegiality, trust and dialogue, nurturing creativity, and also promoting social justice. And actually, as I'll go on to show, this has been a long-standing aspect of the Art Museum and its activities over the past 40 odd years. Just want to show an example here of a recent artwork that was acquired by the Art Museum by Larry Collins, who's a professor emeritus of art at the Miami University. He did this work called Homage to John Lewis. It's a commission. It came to the museum last year, and it's in honor of our former director, Robert S. Wicks, on his retirement and his commitment to social justice. Here we see a portrait of the former Congressman, John Lewis, who passed away in 2020. He contributed so much to civil rights, the civil rights movement. He was there with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, involved in the Freedom Summer, of course, with the education and training of activists, and the March on Selma and March on Washington in the 1960s. So really a giant in terms of civil rights and equality, especially voter rights and democracy for this country. So you can see this wonderful portrait, which is surrounded by achievements and also events that took place during his lifetime. And so it's a wonderful tribute to John Lewis, who also was the recipient of the Miami University Freedom Summer Award in 2018, which is an award that's given every year to people who have made significant contributions to civil rights and to racial equity. This also brings us to the topic of Freedom Summer and its relevance to our location here on the Western College campus, where the training took place in 1964, the training that Cristina mentioned, with 800 students and activists who came together to train and then to go and to assist in voter registration for Black voters in the Deep South, particularly in Mississippi. We have an exhibition on right now called A Lens for Freedom, Civil Rights Photographs by Steve Shapiro. There are about 20 in our collection, these photographs that were taken in 1963 and 1964, but many of them include images that were taken right here in Oxford during that training time, including this image of the activists getting ready to leave on the bus, singing "We Shall Overcome." So this is part of our history. It's part of where we are as a location as well. We want to continue to emphasize that through our collections and through visitation to our museum and to the nearby Freedom Summer Memorial, which is dedicated to the 3 murdered activists, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, that is just nearby to us. And come and see the exhibition. It's open until December 10th. We have a long history of breaking boundaries at the Art Museum. One of the first ones I want to emphasize is its relationship with LGBTQ plus art and artists. So going back to the early 1980s, Sterling Cook, who was then the curator of collections at the Art Museum, organized a really groundbreaking exhibition of the art of Paul Cadmus called Yesterday and Today. This was quite revolutionary in a sense because this was the first retrospective of Paul Cadmus, who's a well-known, celebrated queer artist, a gay queer artist, and you can see his collection in many museums, art museums around the United States and further afield. But this was the first time that it was really showcasing and bringing together many works from different collections, and it was a traveling exhibition that had a huge impact, very memorable impact. And even in those times, you know, this is a quote from the catalogue, an essay by Philip Eliassoff. It says, "The acerbic bite of Cadmus's satire might be ascribed to his personal alienation as an individual in a sexual minority." And you've got to remember, this is 1981, and at this time, the Gay Liberation Alliance was forming in Oxford here, but very much marginalized community of the gay community, gay and lesbian community. It was a very difficult time, and I think things today are very, very different to how they were in the early 1980s. But things like this kind of exhibition would have helped to raise awareness of some of these issues, if not directly, then indirectly. Another key area the Art Museum has really forged ahead in many ways with is our ongoing partnership with the Miami Center and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma. So the Miami University Art Museum has a close relationship with the Miami Center and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma, and we're engaged in a process of community curation in our exhibitions, programs, and collections connected to the Miami Tribe. So you can see things at the museum that were created by Miami Tribe members, including this sculpture in our sculpture park by Eugene Brown, a tribe named Miami, a surveyor stake, a town named Oxford, which was put up coincide with a major exhibition about the Miami tribe and the Miami culture that was at the Art Museum then. We are continuing to work on exhibitions with the Miami Center, and we also were the venue for the starting point for the Walk of Remembrance ceremony, which started on our sculpture park last October to mark the 175th anniversary of the forced removal of the Miami Tribe. Of course, it's the 50th anniversary of the relationship with the Miami Tribe, and the university will be celebrating that through our exhibition, Interconnected, and awards program next week. So please come by to the museum. A couple of other examples of some of the exhibitions and programs that break boundaries for us has been Telling a People's Story, which was an exhibition and is still an exhibition, started in 2018, that's focused on African-American children's illustrated literature. It was the first of its kind devoted to that art and illustration, and it also then led to a major traveling panel exhibition, which is serving venues and programs around the country. It's very successful, and it's also got a lot of programming associated with it too. Also, we've been focused on celebrating women artists and raising awareness of the contributions of women artists and collections and artwork in our collections through the capstone exhibition Confronting Greatness, which was a celebration of women artists, asking that question, why have there been no great women artists, raised by Linda Nochlin in 1971. So that's another example of some of the things that we've been doing, but also thinking about our collections and having greater diversity represented. We think about this in terms of, for example, the works recently acquired. We have a recent painting acquired by Clementine Hunter, African-American self-taught artist from Louisiana, who's very well known now, of course, and very famous in many art museums. We have this wonderful work by her from the 1950s that was something that was originally belonging to Sterling Cook, the curator I mentioned earlier. So we're very pleased to have this in our collection, and also celebrating the works of Ohio-based women artists, particularly from the 19th century, who tend to be otherwise underrepresented. So this work by Alice Shilley recently came to our collection on the topic of Brittany Harvest. So we'll be focusing on women artists in some future exhibitions as well, particularly from this region. And then thinking about our exhibitions going forward, we have our two ongoing exhibitions, of course, Art History at a Glance and Global Perspectives. We're beginning to look at these and think, well, how can we begin to break down some of the boundaries that might exist? For example, Art History at a Glance is very Western art focused. You know, we want to include more artists of color and women artists in this collection. We have so we can have more diversity, but also to break down some of the boundaries with our ancient and ethnographic collections that we have as well on exhibit in Global Perspectives, because they're separated and there are actually many common themes that we can explore across those two. Accessibility is also a very important thing. Accessibility means so much more than just access for people with disabilities. It's also about so many other aspects of being open and inclusive and bringing people into our space. But one of the key aspects here, especially for museums as public spaces, is making our spaces physically more accessible. So we worked and consulted with the Miller Center for Student Disability Services, and we recently installed a push button to allow ease of access into our front entrance. Been working on our exits. We're focusing on our bathrooms next, and lighting and text. So these are some of the practical things that we're doing and thinking about. We're looking towards the AAM, the American Alliance of Museums, for inspiration for structure and process. They recently published this amazing report, which is called Excellence in DEAI. And I would encourage people to go online and download and read the report. It's not just useful for museums. I think it could be useful for any arts organization or any organization for that matter. And so we'll be looking towards this as we move forwards. But what we want to do is develop our own DEAI statement, commitments, and plan. And I just want to summarize our draft statement that we have right now, which is not finalized, but we're getting close to it. And this is our DEAI statement. That is, the Art Museum, as part of the College of Creative Arts and Miami University, commits to address issues of social justice, racial equity, and promotion of dialogue to share knowledge and celebrate diversity through global visual culture. We aspire to be an institution in which the values of diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion are fully present in all that we do. And in addition to that, we have been focused on, with the staff of the museum, but also student representatives and also members of our steering committee. We've been working on a list of commitments. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because of interest of time, but just to say we have 5 pillars represented with people first. We're putting people above collections here, which is kind of a trend that is going on among museums to really emphasize the importance of people. That is really thinking about communities and identifying underrepresented groups and doing more outreach. Personnel as well, to have more training and identify resources so we can diversify across our staff, interns, volunteers, and advisory board members. Secondly, programming and outreach. So how can we do more with education and public programs, doing more than we're doing now? We're doing a lot right now, but do even more to engage diverse artists and educators for diverse audiences. Exhibitions, to develop exhibitions featuring diverse artists and topics related to DEAI, and then collections. So we're thinking collections, how do we prioritize collecting visual cultural objects which address diversity, so DEI, as well as anti-racism and social justice themes, but also raise awareness of our collecting practices too, and how we are doing what we're doing. Resources as well. We need resources. We need budget lines to be able to do this. So thinking about how we can get more fundraising, how we can get more resources for facilities and operations. And then lastly, communication and evaluation. So how do we communicate what we're doing about DEAI and raising awareness, but also how do we evaluate ourselves and think about how we can improve each year in everything that we do. So that's it from the Art Museum side. And I now want to open it up to Q&A and want to thank, of course, our guest speakers. We have very different things that we've presented here, but I'm hoping we'll have some responses and some questions. Sherry, do you have any questions for us from the...
I have a few, and I
Great.
also have an announcement from one of our attendees who wanted to call out an exciting performance coming up at for the Performing Arts Series on November the 11th, Step Africa. So check that out. The easiest way to find out about events, especially if you're looking for events in this area, would be to go to the university's events calendar, and you can set up a sort that would notify you of events like this. So check that out. And one of the questions is asking if you all can elaborate on the best way for someone who wants to learn more about how to improve their DE, A, and I practices and to get assistance. What's the best way for them to go about that?
I'll just start with asking is the best way, which is awesome, because oftentimes we don't want to ask. But one thing I really think we all emphasize, but I want to reemphasize, is that we all have so much more learning to do, whatever our roles are. So I would say, again, one of the wonderful resources we have here at Miami is the DI module series. And so I would say that it's free. We're going to relaunch it in late November, and it's free to all Miami faculty, staff, and alumni and students. So I would say that's one way, and it provides both information and strategies. And then, through resources, definitely on the web pages, and CSDI also has a lot of amazing resources. And if they haven't gone through the anti-racism session, Safe Zone training, those are things that we have that anyone can go through at Miami.
Yeah,
Great.
and I think that's great, Cristina. I would also suggest maybe that, and there are online resources as well too, and guides. And I actually think the DEI Excellence in DEI report by AM is really good, but we have so much resources that's available online as well. So I think that's always a good starting point. But yeah, also go and visit Dasha as well in the Student Diversity Center, and think that's another good potential option to speak to people who are experienced and working in this area.
Yeah,
Yeah, the art museum staff. Go ahead, Dasha. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I was just going to say, I echo everything Cristina said, and having an actual conversation is good because everyone's journey is different, everyone's group is different, and everyone's needs will be different. So we'll be able to have a better conversation on where to start through a conversation.
Absolutely. I was just going to give a plug for the anti-racism training that the art museum staff recently participated in. It was fantastic. We really appreciated that. And I think it was just a matter of reaching out and scheduling that with the instructor. And it was time well spent. So, so another question, what are the next steps or like the next initiatives for diversity, equity, inclusion at Miami?
I'll say most broadly, it's, this year is really about capacity building and really about the climate study. So everyone, hopefully to understand why we're doing this and to participate in that, because the only way we can continue to change things is by gathering data if we want to be evidence-based. So the climate study and the interviews are about gathering data. And we have an annual report, no IDI, that we've done. And as far as transparency, that way folks can see what we're doing with the data. And also, as we have more information, we'll be creating reports to be able to share. So the next steps are really about focusing on more capacity building from my perspective across the university, and then making sure that we have the data so that we can do a DI strategic plan, but we can do it really in a really meaningful way by taking all these really clear steps first.
Great. And I had a curious question. I receive in my email every week a weekly 3 message that has really applicable, important messaging, I believe, that comes from your office. And I just was wondering if there's somewhere that someone would subscribe to that, or if automatically by being a faculty, staff, or student at Miami, you're receiving those emails.
Yeah, everyone receives those, and we include things also, events that CSDI or any other offices sends in, so that it's really about the whole university. However, we are moving away from the weekly 3s into a more robust newsletter so that we can actually focus less on reporting out, but more on these initiatives that are really much more profound. So we've created a DI calendar for the whole university. So those events will be available for anyone, and we'll start sending emails out to remind folks, because so much of it was about what's going on, and we want to make sure that everyone knows what's going on in one central space still. Great.
Still weekly, I assume?
The newsletter, no, will not be weekly, so we can really focus a lot more on materials. But the calendar will be available at any time, any day. So absolutely. So update it every day.
Great. Let me see. I think I have one more question. What kind of opportunities are there for student groups to improve their DEI efforts? And I think, Dasha, you might have already covered this, but if you could elaborate on the steps a student group might take to focus more on DEI.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that our office does trainings and workshops for student groups. So I think reaching out to us could be a good first step. The Center for Student Engagement, Activities, and Leadership also has still workshops dedicated to inclusive leadership. And so if you are a tier 1, 2, 3, or 4 organization, you're required to attend specific programs and training. So I think looking on that list and seeing what's available could be good as well. And then lastly, like I mentioned earlier, every group is going to be different. Every group is going to be at a different space in DEI, especially depending on the group's values and their programming and their initiatives. And so I think, again, having a conversation about what your group needs and how to move forward from there would be great.
Great. Let me see if there's any more questions. I think that might be it. Yep, that covers all the bases. Thank you so much for this great program. And we'll be putting this on our YouTube channel within the week so others can learn from it.
Thank you so
all.
much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been
Have a
wonderful.
great rest of your day.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks.